Hello and welcome to the Bearded Gamers. I am Dan and this is a build mode and it's going to be part 2 of my video log of my Marvel Crisis Protocol table. So if you haven't seen the first video, go and check that out. It tells you how to build the actual gaming table which all this cool terrain is going to go on. You can find a link in the description. And yeah, look at this cool terrain. It's awesome, isn't it? I've got a depot, got shipping containers, all sorts of cool ships and a huge dock crane, and they're going to go on my portable gaming table. So this video, we're going to show you how we've sort of planned out where this is all going to go, how we've actually built the sort of internals of the table, including, you know, like the water effect, where's the ship going to go, plan it all out, and then get it ready almost for the painting stage. So yeah, let's have a look, shall we? So, what materials are you going to need for this next stage of the build? Obviously, we mentioned in the first video that we want to fill most of it with sort of lightweight foam. So I've got this polystyrene sort of packing foam. Got various sizes, various fixes. I'm just going to sort of have a play around, see what works for the you know the sort of design I want to go for. So this I just got out of I think something that my wife had delivered to the house. So yeah, lots of it came in all sorts of different sizes and sheets, but you can pick it up from a hardware store. Also got some XPS styrofoam sheets. Now these are from eBay. They're pretty hard to get hold of in the UK, so I think eBay is probably your only bet. Now you're going to need an assortment of glues, tools and stuff like that. So we've got a series of different craft glues, Mod Podge, tacky glue. This stuff I'm going to use to stick it to the MDF, because the MDF obviously it can warp and we don't want that to happen, so we're going to use a really thick tacky glue to stick our first sheets of polystyrene down. We're going to use obviously the tools here to mark out, cut the foam, measure what we need to. Cocktail sticks, handy for you know, putting multiple layers of the foam together and make sure they stay in place. And then for the final step, we're going to use some Das clay and we're going to use some sculptor mould to give us some ground cover. Well, obviously when we fill in where the water effect is going to go, we want sort of uneven, sort of undulated land, so we don't want it to be perfectly flat like the MDF. So that's most of the tools. So guys, I couldn't resist setting out all of the terrain just to see what it looked like actually on the table. But this has given me a sort of good idea of sort of how much of the table is getting filled up with terrain, what sort of parts would be open. And obviously the main features of the board are going to be the ship, the docking crane and the depot. A lot of this other stuff like the shipping containers and dumpsters and sort of crates and all sorts, scatter terrain, will be, you know, removable. You'll be able to move it around the table. So the idea is that we'll have the kind of these main features and fight around it. I've marked off just with a Sharpie areas that I want, you know, to be the main sort of features. So here we'll have like the little dockside. This line going around here will actually obviously be raised up, so the ship here can be suspended in the water. So it's good to mark this out, make sure you know exactly what you want to achieve from your board, get it marked up and ready to go. So what we'll do next is take all the terrain off and then we can start filling in with some sort of polystyrene sheets the concrete up to the level that we want it to be.
So I've got all my polystyrene sheets in various different sort of shapes and sizes. I did a bit of a test fit first, just to sort of see how it would all go together. So as you can see, I'm fitting those little bits into shape. I'm using some of the tacky glue that I got from Hobbycraft. It's like a really thick version of PVA essentially, which will give us a nice sort of strong bond, but also won't saturate the MDF underneath too much, because we want it to give us a strong bond but not, you know, warp the board potentially. As you see here, I've got the blue styrofoam on the top. I think that's what I was going to use to achieve a more like a different concrete kind of tarmacy effect to the polystyrene, and also it gives us some sort of variant height. So I'm just going to glue all the sections in and use a bit of wood just to sort of push it down. We'll obviously put a bit of weight on the top afterwards once we've got the first layer in. But yeah, it's going together quite nicely. All you've got to be careful of is when you're marking it all out, we've got a fold in the middle of the table, of course, so we need to make sure that we mark that carefully so that when we actually want to close the folding table, it will do so and not damage any of the foam or anything like that. So I've marked it all out carefully to make sure that that's the case. It is quite difficult to cut this foam, I will say that, and to get it neat and tidy. So if you've already got a flat edge that's already sort of neat and tidy, use that on the edge, because that's what you're going to see once the table's folded together. So you can see I've laid down a nice sort of thick layer of glue, but not too much that, like we said, it saturates the MDF underneath. I'm just going to lay down my sections that are all carefully marked out into the glue. I've got some spare MDF sheets that you can sort of see there, which I'm going to use to weigh down and hold it in place overnight.
Right, that is the first layer of foam onto the board. As you can see, this sort of kind of gap here is where the ship's going to go, and the water effect. So we've got a nice sort of thick, that's about 20mm layer of foam on there, and I've just popped these MDF sheets on the top just to weigh it down, just give it some pressure, and wait for that tacky glue to dry. So we'll come back tomorrow morning and see how it looks. Our first layer of foam is down. We actually want it a little bit deeper, so we're going to build up a little bit more and put another layer on. So let's cut that all out.
So you don't want to start on your second layer of foam until you know that the first layer is completely dry. So just make sure you give that enough time, just overnight. It should be enough, or maybe about 48 hours if you want to be absolutely sure, just to get that nice and dry so it's rigid and solid in place. So we're going to start the second layer now. Now, I did have random sort of sizes and shapes of the polystyrene, so I'm just marking out my design, as you can see with the Sharpie on the top there, so I know what I want to achieve, and then just sort of roughly cut in sections to fill that in. Now the blue styrofoam at the back, I wanted to have a little bit of difference in height, so I've got the dock section at the front where the ship's going to go, obviously the water effect, a nice sort of 40mm deep layers of 2 foam, which kind of come to a stop along the middle where we reach the blue foam. Now the blue foam is only about 10mm thick, so that's going to achieve like quite a nice little difference in height across the board, which should give us, something better to play on really. It's a bit more exciting. Now I've only used just a regular cheap craft PVA glue just to get the 2 polystyrene sheets together. It's just cheap and easy really. I don't want to spend too much on the board, so it's just a nice way to get them stuck together without breaking the bank. Mark it all out so you know exactly what you want to do, and I'm just using cocktail sticks just to poke through the 2 layers of polystyrene just to keep them in place. So we want it to be like a nice finish, particularly where the join is, where the gap is, where the 2 halves of the table fold together. We want to make sure that that's nice and neat, so when we come to open it and close it on a regular basis, it does so nicely. And here we go with the layer of styrofoam. Again, you can just use PVA glue or a nice sort of thick craft glue to get that stuck together. Just lay your sheets down one by one, get some weight on there again just to weigh that down. So we'll leave that overnight once again. So it does take a little bit of time to to get to this stage, but I think you'll agree it's all worth it. It's going to look great in the end. Spend a little bit of extra time, getting the board looking exactly the way you want, and yeah, you'll have something amazing to play on at the end. I know I certainly can't wait to play on this board. It's been a lot of fun doing it anyway. So I'm just going to fill in the last section of the blue XPS foam, which will give us a nice texture to work on for the next part of the build. So let's have a look once it's done.
So here we go, guys. This is the board now at the stage where I've filled in all of the foam, all of the styrofoam that we want. We've got a little MDF ramp up here for the car, so because this is going to be the road coming round here. The idea is it'll go up the top there and into the car parking spaces. So this is where the water effect's going to go. So next job is to sort of fill in all of these gaps. Going to use some polyfiller, some sculpt to mold. Going to go smooth all this around here, just get it sort of nice and flat. What we're going to do is eventually put a stone wall along here using a green stuff roller, probably some Das clay. So next step, let's fill in some of these gaps, make it nice and smooth, give it a nice solid finish. And you can see, just so you can see how it works, still folds up nice and neatly, as you can see. Let's get cracking.
So on with the next step, and in the mug here all I've got is just some regular water, and I've got a pot of Wilco's polyfiller, or spackle as you American folks call it. This is just going to allow us to give us a nicer finish on the wall here, so we can attach our stone wall effect afterwards. I'm also going to use this just to fill in all of the gaps between the different layers of foam. And yeah, as you can see, I'm using my finger. I don't mind getting a little bit messy, but what you probably could use is a piece of wood or a piece of card, something that allow you to just sort of smooth it off. Now it's going to be roughly level. I'm not too fussed about making it perfect. I just want to make a sort of flattish surface to something to, you know, that will easily allow me to stick the Das clay to, which we're going to add the stone brick effect onto. So we've got the concrete base sort of done to a level that we're happy with. Now it's time to sort of plan out what we want to achieve around this kind of road section. So I've decided to get the old terrain out again, lay it on the board. This is the kind of where I want the depot to be. So what I'm just going to do is use a Sharpie just to mark out lightly a sort of design until I get it to a sort of stage that I'm happy. So I want the road, you know, to come around the corner there. So I'm just marking off where I think the pavement sort of area would go. I'm kind of just eyeballing the road really. That's why I got the cars out. So I thought, you know, I want it to be almost like a single lane road. So just use that as a guide. You know, the Marvel Crisis Protocol core set comes with some pretty awesome terrain, so I thought I'd try and incorporate them into the design of the board. We've got the cars, the dumpsters, and the sort of traffic signal there, or the level crossing signal. So I thought I'd incorporate that in. So where you can see the doors of the depot, only makes sense that maybe the employees there would walk out the door, go to their car park that's on the left, so there may be a zebra crossing there. And then I thought, well, there must be some staircase going up onto the concrete area there. So I'm just marking that out with a Sharpie. And being the man-child that I am, obviously couldn't help playing with the cars as well. So after planning that all out, I decided that I actually wanted the pavement area to be sort of raised up from the main road. Now, there's lots of different ways you could do this. I've got some thinner sheets of the XPS foam here that I'm going to use to create almost like a little step up and a pavement area around the road. So you can see I'm just going to mark that out and follow my guide that I've done with the Sharpie already, and then cut that out to shape. Now it does go across the half of the board, so I had to be really careful to make sure that I cut that in a completely straight so it lines up with the other polystyrene layers underneath. Load that up with some tacky glue again, and slowly put your pieces into place. Now what came in handy in this part was the actual applicator of the glue itself is kind of has a nozzle that you can move around and get into all those tight places. So it allowed me to put some glue between the two sheets here and give us a much stronger bond by having it on two sides of the foam. Right, so once that layer is down, it is completely dry. We're ready to you know, get the Sharpie out again and start marking up our design. So I'm just using a tape measure here and a Sharpie because I don't want to actually depress anything into the styrofoam as of yet. So we're just going to mark that off really gently just with the Sharpie, just to give us an impression of what the pavement could look like. So I've marked about 5mm around the edge that you can see the whole border. I also just drew a line around the actual depot just so I could see where that's going to sit. But as you'll see now, I've actually decided to do the pavement design across the entire section of styrofoam, even though the depot is going to sit on the top. That way I just thought in the future, if we want to have a different building on top of that, that's a different shape or size, then the pavement pattern is already there underneath. So just get yourself a ruler, mark that out. I've decided to go with 1 inch pavement tiles, but you can of course do a different size if you wish. Really doesn't matter as long as it, you know, looks sort of vaguely realistic for the section you're trying to do. Get yourself some sandpaper as well. What I'm just going to do here is round off the edges of the pavement, or the curb, if you will, because well, at least all the ones here in the UK have a kind of curve to the edge. Next, once you're happy with the design, grab yourself a biro. Doesn't have to be working biro. What we're going to do is just mark in the design that we've already achieved and give that actual depth and relief. So once we paint it, it will look awesome. You can put some cracks and stuff in if you want as well. As you can see, I've just sort of freehanded that design in. A little bit of cracks here and there. Look pretty decent. Right, on to the next step. Now what we're going to do is create the walls that are going to go around our dockyard. So you're going to need some DAS clay, a rolling pin, a tape measure. I've got one of the Green Stuff World small bricks rolling pins, which is going to give us that texture and effect, and yeah, make it look pretty cool. You're going to need a knife, a ruler, and some water as well, so make sure you get all that stuff ready to go. Now I've decided to lay out some cling film. As you might have noticed, my cutting mat is not the cleanest of cutting mats. You know, just a good sign of a used hobby bench. I'm also going to wrap the rolling pin that I'm using in cling film as well, just to keep it clean because it is my wife's, and I don't want her to get mad at me because it's all covered in DAS clay and dirty. So just roll out your clay until you get it to a nice sort of flat, squarish shape. Measure out what you want beforehand so you know what you're working towards. The wall sections that I've got are ended up being around 6 inches long and about 2 to 3 inches deep, but whatever wall surface you're working to, just measure it so you know exactly what you're working to. So I tried to get the clay as thin as I could, but not too thin that, you know, that if we roll on the design it's gonna be lost or make it too flimsy. Just squared off 2 sides of the clay there, just to give us something nice to work with and sort of roughly mark out where the design's going to go. Now we're going to grab our Green Stuff roller. I'm just going to give it a little bit of water just so it doesn't stick to the clay, and then we're just going to easily roll that across the whole design. Give it enough pressure that you get the brick effect evenly across all of the clay. Then we can cut the rest of it to shape. We're just using a nice sort of sharp knife and measure out neatly so we get exactly what we need. And then we should be left with a wall section of the clay with a beautiful stone brickwork design in it. Now I measured out enough that I would be able to get 2 wall sections out of the 1 roll, because I know I'm going to need at least 6 or 7 to complete it. So I'll cut out 1 at a time. Here you can see I'm just peeling it up from the cling film so it's not stuck to the board underneath, and we have got a really nice design. So now it's time to get the wall sections stuck onto the area of the dock that we want them. So I'm just using some Mod Podge here. I'm just going to give that a nice coat over the whole area with a nice old brush, and then we're going to take our wall section, lightly tap it into the right place, and get that secured on the wall there. So yeah, as you can see, I've done 3 sections already. Now we don't press too hard because you don't want to lose the stone brickwork. At this point, the clay is still malleable, so if you press too hard, you're going to lose some of that design. All I've done is then just used my finger across the top just to stretch some of the clay out, just so that it joins the wall and has a solid line across the top rather than it being loose. And then yeah, just keep filling all the sections that you want across the entire length of your dockyard. decided to do was just to take a biro and continue the brickwork design up into the top section where it meets at the top. So all I'm doing now is taking some little balsa wood sections that I've just cut to the right height and shape that I wanted. I used a sort of knife just to sort of shaper down the edges so they're not completely square. Added a little bit of extra grain effect by using a wire brush, and then I'm just using the Mod Podge to stick these beams over our 6 sort of inch sections of wall. Not only will this hide the seam, but it'll also give you a sort of more realistic finish, because rarely do you see walls that, at least brick walls, that go continuously that far. So it will just make sure that we get a much more sort of realistic dockyard section when we come to paint it up. Now, of course, we're going to fill in the section at the bottom there with sculptor mould probably in the next video. Well, you can see where the ship is marked out at the moment. Because the land, the seabed will be uneven, it will come up and sort of waves across the section of walls there. So we'll add lots of cool stuff like reeds and weeds and moss and damp and all sorts up there. So it'll break it up even more. But I'm then just going to give it a little bit of coat over Mod Podge over the whole of the wood and finish it up so it gets a nice strong bond finish.
And here we go, guys. So I'm going to call this video done. I've got to a stage that I'm happy with. Not quite got up to paint ready, but we're getting there. Nice brick effect along the wall of the jetty here. Obviously, this is where our ship and water effect is going to go. That'll be the next job, to create the seabed here. We've got our nice little ramp going up. We've got our pavement area for our depot and building, and we've got the wall comes all the way around down here to our little staircase up there. So all I did to finish it off was just to give it a whole coat of Mod Podge, basically just filler it all in, keep it nice and strong for gaming and hopefully for painting. So, there you have it, guys, part 2 of my table build for Marvel Crisis Protocol. I think you'll agree the dockyard is coming along nicely, and yeah, lots to look forward to in the next part. So if you've enjoyed following me along in this build, then please do consider giving us the old thumbs up, the like, the subscribe, share it with your buddies if you think they'll get some use out of it as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time for some more Marvel Crisis Protocol dockyard table build. Which will include the seabed and putting together where the ship's going to go, I think. So lots to look forward to. So see you again soon, guys. Thanks for watching.